And welcome, everyone. This is Linda Bennett, your spiritual counselor and psychic host for Metaphysically Speaking. And we are coming to you via radio in Sarasota, Florida, and on YouTube and Facebook. You just have to type in metaspeak.com. This light went off. And is that okay?
We're live.
Okay. These little technical difficulties here. I might be too close to the piece of equipment. I tend to whack equipment out. I thought this microphone was used to me by now. See, there's no light. There's no light.
What's
okay.
that?
No, I mean the little part here.
Don't you worry about
okay.
a thing.
All right.
I'm the executive producer. I actually do know what I'm talking about.
Then I'll believe you.
It's limited in scope, but
that is Shawnee, and she's my executive producer, and she's in charge of making all of this come to all of you. And so we're doing open metaphysical questions today. And again, if you have questions, you can call my office at 727-736-4567. If you have a personal question, you must accompany it with a metaphysical question, because people don't care about you and your personal life unless you have some spectacular story. They want to hear, okay, they'll listen to your personal question, but then they want to hear something about the universe and your experiences in the universe. In our last show, we had a caller from Connecticut, and he was asking about Sasquatch. And what else was he asking about? UFOs. And then we were explaining different religion and male power and the changes that are happening on the planet right now, which we did not finish covering. And we're talking about, if you've watched any of the programs on A&E or History International, like Ancient Aliens and the Mayan calendar, which apparently is talking about a great shift of consciousness and the end of an era, ERA, or Baktun. That means that part of existence is over, and we're on to hopefully a new part. Now, obviously, after the storm, we've had great physical changes on the planet. Superstorm Sandy. We will have more. And depending upon the consciousness, which reminds me of my UFO experience years ago, which I did a program on, and I think we had more people in the temple for that lecture than any other lecture. It coincides with what the UFOs told me, the UFO ambassadors told me, and coincides with, say, Edgar Cayce, Nostradamus, the Hopi Indian prophecies, the Aboriginal prophecies. When you talk to them, there's a tribe in Australia of Aborigines that stopped having children years ago because they didn't want to bring any children into the world with the great changes, earth changes that were coming. And if you want to talk about earth changes, understand that this is, again, a live planet. It's not Jesus striking you dead. It's not Muhammad being angry. It is not God punishing you. This is a live planet, and it periodically goes through changes. These changes have been accelerated because of climate change, of oil and gas fumes, carbon monoxide, poisoning of the planet, oil disasters, warming because of too much carbon monoxide in the atmosphere and the ozone layer being depleted. And so the changes become worse than necessary. They can become better by people learning how to recycle. And you think, well, gosh, how many people does it take to recycle? If you consider that most park benches and now children's playground equipment and lots of other things are made out of recycled material, you can be sure that it's a good idea to save your plastic bottles and pay an extra $3 a month to have them pick up the recycling at your curb, or go down to the recycling bin. I used to drive all the stuff down to the recycling place every single month and just bring everything that I had. I bring my newspapers to my vet clinic so that the pussycats and puppy dogs and birds and everybody have fresh newspapers. So we can all make a difference together. I personally would like the World Health Organization or the United Nations to get together and get those incredibly giant, destructive masses of bottles and nets out of one. There are 2 in the Pacific Ocean and 1 in the Atlantic Ocean. Get those out of the oceans, and there'll be less death of fish, sharks, whales, dolphins. You can't get out of a net. They don't have any capabilities of understanding what has happened to them, so they can't reason their way out. And the more you flip around in a net, the more caught you are. So I would like the United Nations to stop having general meetings and do something. That's my thought pattern. We're going to be talking about the astrology of Saturn in Scorpio. And I believe we did not finish covering before the consciousness. And I think that caller, did that caller call back?
Yes.
Okay, so caller, you're still Karen, right?
Yes.
Okay, ask the question again that we did not get to about people's consciousness.
Yes, I was wondering, when are we going to stop labeling ourselves as white, black, female, male, Christian, Muslim, gay, straight, and become a higher spiritual being?
That is a great question, and that is where free will comes in, which I always say is God's curse on humanity. Our souls know better, but it's the egos, and it's your parents, and it's your neighbors, and it's the country club, and it's the school, and it's peer pressure that tries to gather a little army and be more like themselves. It has to stop with the male consciousness of, I'm conquering. It has to stop with the female consciousness of letting males conquer, of wanting to be the conquered's favorite woman. How many wars were fought? How many people died behind the scenes in kingdoms, whether it was England or Egypt, with somebody being poisoned or somebody being disappeared? You can't be the favorite of anybody who wants to control the world, because that kind of person is an egomaniac. So we have to use our free will to change our thought patterns. And it's hard when people are fundamentalists where they think they are right. The Jews think they're the chosen people. The Catholics used to say you have to go to heaven. The Anglicans also, I don't know what the Anglicans are saying. If anybody's Anglican out there or Episcopalian, I would like you to call in or send us a tweet or something telling us what the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church have to say about, do you have to be Anglican or Christian or believe in Jesus to go to heaven? Which, if they're still saying that, I feel sorry for them, and nobody should go anymore. The Islamics want everybody to be Islamic in the Sharia law, which is women stay in the house. They don't even leave the house. They have to be covered. They can't go to their own front doors. They don't get educated. They get killed very easily and disappear, and they take a new wife, which used to be part of the witch craze. If a man didn't want his wife anymore, he'd just say, oh, I just discovered she was a witch. She has to be burned. I'm so upset. I got a new girlfriend on the side, by the way. So as soon as we get rid of her, I can marry this one. So it has to be human beings saying, we are tired of cruelty. We are tired of men starting wars. We are tired of the Taliban and the Salafists. That's Salafists, which are the group of Islamics that want to go back to worse than Sharia law. That is what Osama bin Laden was. The Wahhabists are in Saudi Arabia. They are also wanting to go back to worse than Sharia law, which is worse enough. The Jews have to stop thinking that they are the chosen people, which is what they said to people when they were trying to start their religion. They're actually Canaanites, which they have proven because of ancient Jewish pottery being the exact same pottery as the Canaanite communities. So people have to stop thinking that they're superior, and we have to understand that we are not physical beings eternally. The Catholic Church, with this nonsense that you have to have your physical body buried, what do you think happens after like 100 years? You dig it up and it's bones or it's dust? What happens if a building explodes? The person's not going to get to heaven because their bodies will not be raised up out of the grave and meet Jesus and all raised to heaven. That is such garbage, people. Use your heads. Look up in the sky at night and look at the stars. Do you think God made the planet Earth to suffer eternal damnation because they don't know about Jesus, or they don't believe that Jesus died for our sins? Nobody dies for your sins. Jesus died because we all die. He had a 3-day death experience. Mine was only a matter of hours in each time. We all have death experiences. We lose the physical body like you change your clothes. And we have the same consciousness, because the consciousness is our soul. Your soul, your brain is your soul's mind. So your soul continues throughout eternity. It's part of the God force. As I've said before, we're all like a giant wad of chewing gum. And this little piece came out and had a question. And then it needed to get the answer. And if it was smart, it zoomed right back up into the giant wad of chewing gum. If it was dumb and asked another question, it got pulled further and further away. As we advance spiritually, we get closer and closer and closer and pop back up into the giant wad of chewing gum. So, Karen, when people change their consciousness, when they stop wanting to be black, I don't know how people are describing themselves as black when they look white with a tan. I don't know why it's important to anybody to be described as black. I wish people of color would stop separating themselves out like they're a separate species that landed on the planet somehow, and try to make themselves different from everybody else. And if they still want to talk about racism and slavery, then go to Ghana, for instance. Go to the Ivory Coast, where slavery still goes on. Slavery is still in the Middle East, where they take children from the Philippines. That poor little girl that was stolen from, what was it, Spain or Portugal years ago? Blonde hair, blue eyes, little boys, little girls disappear, wind up in the Middle East as sex slaves. So if anybody doesn't like me saying it, then here's a thought. Stop doing it. So stop making yourselves different. Understand that we are souls, which continues through eternity. And just as you change your clothes and take a shower and get in your jammies at night and then get in the shower in the morning and put your clothes on to go to work, the same thing happens lifetime after lifetime. When you stop wanting to be a blonde, black, Jewish, Islamic, Catholic, tall, blue-eyed, dark-skinned, light-skinned, Indian, whatever. When you want to be what you are, which is a soul, a part of the divine light, a loving being, and will not tolerate the things that drag your spirit down, like drugs, drinking, smoking, eating animals, and you start thinking consciously about education, about an arts education, a music education, because that brings beauty into your life, as well as good energy vibrations, and raises your level of consciousness. If your consciousness is low, it's like you've got blinders on, like horses in races where they don't want the horse to look left or right, so they have these blinders on the sides of their eyes. That's how many people go through life. They think their little church, their little synagogue, that's all there is. We have to preserve that. What happened to the religions in Atlantis? Well, guess what? There weren't any. There was spirituality in Atlantis. Everything comes to pass. Everything has its era. And the way you evolve spiritually is to look forward, look up, not down. Look beyond. There are tribes of Indians in the United States, and when they make decisions, their decisions are based upon how they will affect the next 7 generations. If everybody made decisions that way, and not only the next 7 generations, but the next 70 generations, we wouldn't have a contaminated planet. We wouldn't do things that were politically and big business expedient. The idea that big business should run the world is nuts because they had 5-year-old children on labor lines. The Triangle Shirt Factory, where I can't remember, 75 women burned to death because they had the doors locked so they couldn't sneak out. And the building went on fire and they burned to death. Same thing with nightclubs. Stay out of them. They're rat holes. They're drug bins. And they have their doors locked too, so people can't sneak out. And every now and then there's a fire and everybody's terribly surprised. How could you be terribly surprised when they purposely lock the doors and you can't get out? So when you unlock your own mind, when you unlock your own heart, when you stop the need to be superior to other beings, I tell you that most people listening to this program are not even superior to their own cats and dogs. Because guess why? Your cats and dogs are not judging you based on your color. They don't care if you go to church or you don't go to church. They don't care if you're sick or you're well. They just care that you're kind to them. They just care that you love them and take good care with good food, and you bring them to their vets for their dental cleansings and their overall checkups. That's all they care about. So they're doing a better job on the planet than we are. Look at injured animals and the people who approach them. That show on the Animal Channel, Pit Bulls and Parolees. I mean, those people on that show look like you'd be scared to meet them in a dark alley. But they're kind. And they're gentle people. And they rescue animals. And it's always amazing to me, and it makes me happy to see them approaching an animal that's terrified. And when animals are terrified, they growl, they howl, they go to attack. But their calmness, and the animals see their auras, and they calm right down. So these big, horrible pit bulls that everybody's afraid of calm down, wag their tails, let them get put in a crate and carried off to the rescue center. Animals are doing a better job on the planet than we are. So, Karen, I hope that answers your question, and we're going to be taking a break, and we will be back with you with more Metaphysically Speaking coming right up. And welcome back, everyone. This is Linda Bennett with Metaphysically Speaking, and if you're in the Sarasota area, you can catch us on the radio, WTMY, on Saturday and Sunday, and you can catch us on the web anytime. You can type in metaspeak.com on Facebook or the World Wide Web, and or METAPHYSICALLY. No, don't type in Metaphysically Speaking. My producer is shaking her head vigorously. No, just type in metaspeak.com, METASPEAK.com. And you will be directed as to where to go. One of my students has put a bunch of my television shows up on the air there for you. And you can also hear this show and other previous shows. Now, our other caller was asking about when we're going to get our consciousness clear. And I said when we want to, when people realize that we're not just physical beings, that we are spiritual beings in a physical body having that experience. Pardon me, I just swallowed wrong. Right now, Saturn, the planet that is the great teacher in school, who you didn't like, you thought was a big pain in the neck, pushed you too far, too hard, and then 10 years later you say, gosh, what a great teacher. I didn't catch it at the time, but that teacher really taught me self-esteem. The teacher taught me how to speak, whatever the teacher did. That planet of Saturn is the great teacher that everybody wants to whack over the head until they finally grow up and realize the lessons. Now, it's gone into Scorpio from Libra, October and until September 2015. So what does this mean? Okay, Libra is justice and balance and harmony. People need to learn to strive for that instead of indecision, which is the downside of Libra. Scorpio is the only one of the 12 signs that they acknowledge, aside from Ophiuchus, which is the 13th sign, that will be part of the new astrology as we get the planetary changes. Scorpio is represented in its lowest aspect by the Scorpion. Scorpion, remember the old story about how the scorpion tries to convince the frog to take him across the pond, and the frog says, "What do you think, I'm stupid? You're going to sting me and we'll both drown." The scorpion says, "You're stupid. We will both drown. I don't want to drown." And halfway across, they're chatting up a storm, and all of a sudden the scorpion says, "I can't resist it." Bang! He whacks the frog dies, and they both drown. So Scorpio can mess itself up badly and everybody else around it. When it stops wanting to sting everything and rule everything and run everything, it becomes the eagle. And the eagle sees the ground and the sky. But the eagle has to learn not to fly too far down and try to gobble up everything because it's hungry, and just make a wise selection of a slower, older animal, and not the young, vibrant creatures that must continue to breed, and feed its young with the elder members, and understand the wisdom of that. And when it truly understands the blessings of the earth, because it looks to the sky for guidance, then it transforms into the phoenix. It dives right down into the flames, and it emerges as the magnificent, gigantic bird. The Mayans call it Quetzalcoatl, and it is the transformed being that sees the earth, the sky, and the heavens, and is functioning on a spiritual level. Scorpio in spiritual astrology is the female energy of God, the power to create and destroy. If things aren't right, you must start again. Many people are terrified of Scorpio. Well, many Scorpios use their power incorrectly. They might be sexual beings and live for the crotch. Remember the expression, live by the sword, died by the sword? I have an expression, live by the crotch, die by the crotch. So instead of thinking of sex all the time, you need to transmute that into, how can I make my life better? How can I make the lives of my loved ones better? How can I make the planet better? My community better? That's the proper use of Scorpio. That's the proper use of power. Interestingly enough, Hillary Clinton is a Scorpio. She is beloved even in the countries that hate us, because she's a straight talker, which Scorpio tends to be. I have a Scorpio rising. We're straight talkers. We say what we mean what we say, when we're honorable. You have to be honorable to be a good Scorpio. She is respected. She is well-liked. She is known for telling you like it is and telling you how you can fix it, if you need to. So, if that's the person you want to be, even if you're not Scorpio, whatever sign you are, if you want to be a straight shooter with honor and graciousness, if you're telling somebody off, you tell them off with manners and dignity, and think of yourself in the position of the person you're explaining things to or telling off, so to speak, and realize that they have vulnerabilities and fears just like you do. Then you're using the Scorpio power to destroy what is bad and recreate something good. And remember, you can't change anybody else. That is a downfall of Scorpio. I have learned that the hard way. I have had 2 marriages and divorces. I knew both of them would not work, but they were old karma. The first ex saw that by a visit to Mystic Seaport. Didn't believe me, didn't believe in hocus pocus. We'll talk about that experience in Mystic Seaport at another time, but that's a fascinating past life flashback for people who are living in that lifetime. And so, if you want to be the kind of person that you should be, because your soul is limitless in its ability to be brilliant and kind and loving, then every single time you're confronted with an issue, do what God would do. Do what the angels would do. Do what the nature spirits would do. Do what your pussycat would do. Do what your puppy dog would do. The right thing. Be kind. If you're going to give somebody bad information or bad news or tell them that they've done something wrong, don't be vicious. Don't raise your voice. I can't stand screamers. Somebody starts raising their voice, I tune out. I don't actually know anybody at this point who still screams. If people are screaming, run the other way. Because they are desperate. And they are desperate to make themselves known and have power over you and dominate you. Talk calmly and nurturingly. Explain the situation that may not be working or how they've made a mistake and offer a suggestion as to how they can make it better. Years ago when I was in business, I had 26 people reporting to me, and I would say, don't come to me with the problem. Come to me with the problem and your suggestions on how we can make it better. I don't want to hear you whining. I'll push you right out the door of my office. Come to me with at least one solution and how you think we can implement it. And then I'll make the decision because I may have another idea. Maybe we have to combine the ideas. So that sure eliminated the knocking on my door, I will tell you, because they had to start thinking about how they could participate in making things better. So Saturn, the great teacher, in Scorpio, the creation and destruction and recreation from the destruction, out of the ashes rises the phoenix, is going on until September 2015, coinciding with this so-called December 21st, 2012 explosion on the Earth, which I do not feel is the destruction of the Earth. We will continue to have accelerated Earth changes. And our last caller wanted to know about when we're going to stop labeling ourselves as black and white and male and female. Well, when people demand it. And people stop identifying themselves as bro or babe or whatever else they want to do, that they do now, which is bad habit, which is ignorance, because I'm not your bro or your sis or babe. I'm a soul. You're a soul. Your pets at home are souls. By the way, if you watch those shows, which I'm really tired of these idiots going into these haunted places with their little cameras and their little microphones and hearing somebody whispering who's a spirit who's haunting the place, do an exorcism. That's what I want to see. I don't need another hotel that's haunted. Well, they have a dog that they brought in. It's a Belgian sheepdog, I believe, that was about to be put down, killed in a kill shelter. And they rescued it because the dog looked directly at him and said, take me home. And he did. And the dog is very tuned into spirits. Now, all animals see spirits. Whether it's your grandmother or the people who lived in the house before you, the man who used to live here and died here in the house that I'm in, used to come visit. And when I described him to the sprinkler guy, his eyes almost fell out of his head because that's exactly the way he looked. And that's a jacket he wore even in 90-degree heat because he was an old-fashioned gentleman and he had to have a jacket when he greeted people. And regardless of what the situation is, stop thinking of yourself as that being and think of yourself as a radiant beam of light. And what do radiant beams of light do? They radiate light. And if you're being mean and selfish and labeling others and labeling yourself, you're not being a beam of light. You're being something that's going to die and rot. You're being a flesh thing. Flesh does not continue on, your soul does. And that is the gigantic lesson of Saturn in Scorpio, that you are a creative being. Gemini is the male aspect of God in spiritual astrology, the idea, the seed. Scorpio takes that seed and creates with it. The perfect example of the true Trinity is not the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. By the way, the Holy Ghost in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean was represented by a white dove. And the white dove was one of the ancient symbols of the female energy of God. So sneakily tucked away in this so-called Catholic and Christian Trinity is the female energy of God. But it's not the Father and the Son. And then they wonder why they have trouble with incest and homosexuality of priests against young boys. That's your basic guidance. It's the Father, the Mother, and whatever they create together, the child. The Father, the Mother, and the child. I have my nativity scene up here on my altar. I have a small nativity, and I have one in my dining room that you can see from my living room. It's a small nativity. the Father, the Mother, and the Child just together in a circle with a little lamb, and 3 angels surrounding it, up all year round. And then I put it at the center of my dining room table at Christmas time, which for me starts Thanksgiving night. And I put it up and feature it. So even though I'm not Catholic, I was raised Catholic but fought all the way, I still acknowledge the Trinity. I still acknowledge the entire family of Mary and Joseph and Jesus for planning for generations to come at a certain time to try to change the Jewish religion from male dominance, patriarchal, to joint male-female. When we do the Christmas show, I'll be explaining more about that. But Jesus didn't come to start Christianity. There was no Christianity till the 2nd and 3rd centuries, till Constantine bumped off his opponents who acknowledged Mary Magdalene and acknowledged the children of Jesus and had them killed on the way to the meeting, the great conference, and kept only his proponents and created the Catholic Church. There was no Christianity. Jesus was Jewish, and he came to fix the Jewish religion. So the idea that one religion is better than the other, I don't want any religion on the planet. We will not change until we get rid of religion and bring in spirituality. Bring in God, bring in the angels, bring in all of the aspects of God. And for people who say, well, the Hindus have lots of gods, no. Just like you have billions of cells in your physical body. How could God be less complex than your physical body? How could there be fewer atoms of the God force than there are stars in the sky? Planets in the solar systems and the galaxies. Think about that. And then think how important your religion is. And unlike some ministers who say, well, we need religion to give people a framework. No, you don't. You need spirituality to give people a framework. You need to give people the truth. But that ends your little, kingdom of your giant crystal church. How people built a glass church on a fault line in California, that's Schuler's place, strikes me as incredibly stupid. When they have an earthquake that hits that area, I pray it is not on a Sunday. That'll be a nightmare for people inside that glass building. And even if certain panes don't crack, the framework can't hold the panes. Because we don't build buildings with windows anymore. It's got to be air conditioned, all enclosed in. Can't get any fresh air in. God help us, we don't want the fresh air. We just want to breathe in carbon monoxide. So Saturn in Scorpio teaches us that we must think before we act. We must do something that we would be proud of if it were our very last deed on the planet. We must say words that we would want God and the angels to reverberate with, that we would want on our headstones if you choose to be buried. I will be cremated. You want every word that you say to be something you can be proud of. That is the power of Scorpio. The power of self, personal transformation, of setting a good example and good rules in your home for your children. If you act with honor and dignity, most of the time, your children will follow. If you act like a bum, your children will either be repelled like I was, because I had 2 alcoholics for parents, or they'll turn out just like you. And you will be partly responsible for that, because we all have free will. And the kids could run like the Dickens, like I did, away, and live completely opposite the way my parents did, or they can be just like you. And we will come back with not only Saturn in Scorpio, but Pluto in Capricorn. This is Linda Bennett. Stay with us. And welcome back, everyone. This is Linda Bennett with Metaphysically Speaking, and we are talking about astrological changes, and we just finished talking about Saturn in Scorpio. And remember, even if you don't have Scorpio in your chart, you can learn the lessons of Scorpio by transforming yourself, whatever habits you have. If you're an alcoholic, if you're a drug user, if you're a violent person, there is help for you. If you're promiscuous, there is help for you. You have community centers where you can go for counseling, Planned Parenthood. Unless Romney gets in, then there'll be no more Planned Parenthood. You can go to a wise minister or priest, which they do exist. That's not going to try to push the religion on you, but maybe they're trained in counseling and they can help you. You can always call and ask and say, I'm not a member of your church, but I understand Father so-and-so or Minister so-and-so or Rabbi so-and-so that you're a good counselor. May I come with a donation and I need your help? They will help you. I'm a counselor. I will help you. Anybody in your community who is a counselor or a social worker, you can offer services. If you say you're a painter, you can show them your artwork and offer to trade for a certain amount of counseling sessions. Say you're a landscaper, etc., etc. So once upon a time, there was no money. There was just trading of services and goods. We will go back to that eventually. There are still communities around the world and around the country that do that. So you can make that offering. So we are also under Pluto, which is the house of the occult, and occult simply means hidden knowledge. You will hear ministers and priests screaming about, the occult is evil. No. People blaming everybody for something that they're doing or fearful of are evil. The occult is hidden knowledge, hidden wisdom, only for the initiates. Like Jesus had different members who are on different levels of his apostles. There were not just 12 apostles. That represents the male aspect of astrology. One of Jesus's parables, I'm going to paraphrase, was that for those who can hear, have ears, can listen. Meaning, if you have the inner ear, the inner eye, the spiritual ear eye, you can understand the more esoteric level of what I'm saying. If you don't, you can just take the general lesson. So every teacher, whether it's me or 1,000 other people across the planet, teach on various levels. I cannot tell you how many people over the years would attend my lectures and come to me a year later, a month later, 6 months later, years later and say, I went to your lecture and so and so and so and so, and I didn't get it until one day you said something on your show and it really clicked. Or one day something happened with my husband or my wife or my kids and it really clicked and I understood it on a deeper level. We're all on a deeper level, a less deep level, and on a superficial level, which is how we get through the day, if we're terrified of life. Well, Pluto tries to teach you not to be terrified of life because you're here for lessons. So listen to your teacher Saturn in Scorpio. And Pluto is a generational planet. And that means it lasts anywhere from 20 to 30 years, depending upon the cycle and how it's moving. And Pluto in Capricorn, which is where it is now, Capricorn is an earth sign. It is the third and final earth sign of the 3 earth signs. The first is Taurus, the second is Virgo, the third is Capricorn. The higher level of Taurus is very good in business, it's very pragmatic, and it's very tenacious. The lower aspect of Taurus, it's the giant bull sitting on the railroad tracks, munching on buttercups, refusing to move, even though the locomotive is bearing down on it, and the bull is totally certain that the train is going to stop for it. It's shocked, I tell you, when it gets run over. And the angels are saying, what did you think, stupid? The train is not stopping for you. That's why you're here in the asteroid with us now, instead of munching on your buttercups. Virgo is the second of the earth signs. Its positive aspect is that it is very businesslike, it is very professional, it's very accurate, it wants things done the right way. The downs, there are a lot of accountants, for instance, who are Virgos. A lot of people in sales, merchandising, and design, interestingly enough, because design must be perfect or the line comes out crooked. or it comes out too short or too long or whatever. The downside of Virgo is it clicks out. It doesn't want to know anything about emotions. Its partner, 12 signs, 6 partners, its partner is Pisces. And Pisces is overly emotional. It's the last sign in the zodiac. And the downside of Pisces is, I'm so upset I can't possibly do it. It's a sign of addiction. The upside of Pisces, Virgo's partner, is that it becomes spiritual because it leaves the addiction behind and it transcends the physical restrictions like the 5-pointed star and becomes a spiritual being. So Virgo must learn to be more like its partner Pisces and be more feeling and emotional, not just precise and exact. A lot of engineers also are, and architects are also Virgo. By the way, the partner of Taurus is Scorpio, where Saturn is right now. So Taurus needs to learn to be more mercurial, more action-oriented like Scorpio, more willing to transform like Scorpio. The third earth sign is Capricorn. The downside of Capricorn, it's that it's depressive, it's morose, nothing's ever going to get better. My life is a disaster. Everything is a cloudy day. And there are more suicides in Capricorn than any other sign. Why? Because it's the most depressed. The other thing is, it's depressed during the holidays. Everybody's supposed to be cheerful. I don't think there are going to be a lot of cheerful people this Christmas, pardon me, because of all the terror of worrying about the end of 2012 and because of the storm. People have lost their homes. They've lost their towns where they used to live. It's not there anymore. So sadly for the economy, there's going to be a downturn in brick and mortar sales. There should be an upturn on home shopping channels because people can order and they don't have to go out to a store that no longer exists. I frankly, personally, would rather see local stores like Main Street rather than big box stores everywhere. By the way, they've proven that when a big box store moves in, it's bad for the general economy because the money doesn't stay in the community, it gets shipped out to corporate headquarters. If you shop in your local bookstore, in your local dress store, in your local hardware store, it stays in the community. So think about that as you're busy rebuilding. So Capricorn is more depressive, more fearful, more sad. The upside of Capricorn is that it is also organized like Virgo, but it is also emotionally tuned in. It likes to plan. It likes to organize, but it also takes people's feelings into account. I have a cousin who's a Capricorn. She planned for this storm ahead of time. She found a hotel that was safe to go to and that took dogs because she has a dog. She dragged her sister kicking and screaming, Miss Scorpio, my cousin. The other cousin, one's a Scorpio, one's a Capricorn. If you want to talk about the two worst signs living together, there they are. And she dragged her kicking and screaming. And then she was happy she did because they survived the storm safely. They didn't lose their power. Their cars were safe. They were safe. And so therefore, I won't mention names, but my cousin knows who she is, who's a Capricorn. And she did everything wisely. She organized, she planned, she didn't get depressed, she didn't get fearful. She got everything organized, everything straight, everything was pre-packed, and off they went. And so there, including the dog, and so therefore everything turned out well for them, and fortunately their home, astonishingly, was not destroyed. Didn't even get flooded. So that is a positive use of Capricorn. Now, I tell my Capricorn people who start calling me at the beginning of October this year, was my first call, am I putting my Christmas message on? It starts off with Grandma got run over by a reindeer. And all these years I've had it on, only one person complained. It was an elderly woman who said, I don't think that's very funny and I don't want to talk to you. Well, honey, I didn't want to talk to you either if you're going to be like that. Because you didn't listen to the rest of the message, which goes from Grandma got run over by a reindeer to explaining why Grandma got run over by a reindeer. And then it goes into Silent Night. And I talk about the best gifts you can give. which are love and kindness and thoughtfulness, etc. Merry Christmas. So Capricorns can say to themselves, okay, I'm in a physical body. It's my lesson to be in a physical body, or I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in a physical body if I didn't have to be, if I didn't have to learn lessons, if I didn't have gifts to give others. Because that's also why you're in a physical body, to make a difference where you are, to make things better for people, to do something good for people. So Pluto, the house of the occult hidden knowledge, will continue to reveal itself, will continue to reveal the levels of information that Jesus was giving, that Buddha has given, that Mary has given. Isn't it interesting how often Mary appears in a place before disasters? The last place she was seen was in Conyers, Georgia, several years ago, and Georgia was hit with the storm. Prior to that, she was seen in Yugoslavia, which is now torn to shreds, and the Muslims are killing the Christians, and the Christians are still killing the Muslims, etc. She was seen over the Coptic Church in Egypt, and of course, Egypt is a disaster. By the way, are you saying that the Arab Spring was a disaster? No. But when you have people who are youthful and inexperienced, they don't know that bad guys slip in between them and ferment disaster. And that's what the fundamentalists were waiting for. They were helping to ferment the problems on the university campuses and in the schools, high schools, trade schools, whatever exists anywhere. They were in there making things worse, pretending they were students. And so therefore, the Islamic element that is radical and terrorizing is trying to take over the Middle East, which will take over the world. I desperately not only want green energy. Why isn't there green energy in Florida? Florida has sunshine most of the time. Why isn't there green energy in every state? There's a guy who makes vitamins out in Nevada, and his entire plant is controlled by solar energy. His entire manufacturing facility is controlled by solar energy. Why isn't that all over the country? Why isn't there wind power? They've discovered that if they put the windmills at a certain height, it won't kill the migrating birds. Windmills, when they were first being put up, slaughtered millions and millions and millions of birds. We are losing birds. You're wondering why there are fewer birds in your backyard? Because there are fewer wetlands. Areas that they used to nest in the woods are gone because there's a condo group there or a mall. So if you want to transform and learn the lessons, the deeper lessons of spiritual teachings, you must look inward. You must go inside. I used to tell my students you must go within to go without. You must go inside yourself to discover the God force, that vibration that is the God force, to be able to hear the universe speaking to you, to be able to sense angel presence, UFO presence, danger, harmony, whatever it is you're supposed to learn at that particular moment. That is what Pluto is trying to teach you. And it is in the sign of the most depressive people. So if it can help the most depressive people overcome their fears, it can help you, whether or not you have Capricorn or Capricorn's partner Cancer, which says, I'll just love everything and it'll be fine. Well, you have to love with action, and you have to love wisely. If you love a rattlesnake, you're going to get bitten and die. If you love a child and nurture the child, you're going to have a wonderful person, generally speaking. Because there are some pretty crappy kids out there who turn into crappy adults. But that's their free will. You can have the worst environment and be a fabulous person. You can have the best environment and be a bum. It's up to you. So if Pluto, the house of the occult, hidden knowledge, can teach you anything, if you let it teach you, you will transform. And 260 years ago, when Pluto was last in Capricorn, we had the revolution. The colonies decided they wanted to get away from the old mother country of England. And we finally won our freedom. Hades is also a ruler in Pluto, and that rules disaster and medical diseases. How fitting that we had this horrible, never-seen-before storm. But it also rules medical healers, doctors, energy workers, etc. And it's telling us to get our act together, which I have been saying for the last 30 years. Get your act together. Help your neighbor. You can't change your neighbor, but you can be a good example. When I first started transforming my front yard and my backyard from a weed patch into beautiful gardens and plants that are drought tolerant, one of my neighbors moved in and she said, "You're humiliating me." I said, "What do you mean, Liz?" She said, "You're humiliating me because now I have to do something with my yard." And then the guy across the street who hated any kind of gardening put a couple of flowers in and took down an old dead tree, which sadly was an owl house. And so they were screech owls, tiny little owls, and they disappeared. But he painted his house. He got his act together. The guy who moved in next door got his act together because he looked at our houses and said, "Whoa, I have to compete." I still have the most complex gardening system because that is my exercise. But Pluto in Capricorn is trying to teach all of us to climb out of our misery, our insecurities, our confusion of being a physical being instead of a spirit being, which is what we truly are, and transform into light. If we do that, we will have a transformed planet. Until we do that, we won't have a transformed planet. We'll have wars, we'll have horrors, we'll have starvation, we'll have mutilation, we'll have destruction. When we learn the lesson of light, we will have light. And remember, if you just open up your hearts and minds to God's universal truth, you'll know that God and the angels are always with you. This is Linda Bennett with Metaphysically Speaking.